Welcome back to Cut the Chat Life Science Insider. This week's episode is hosted by Seuss Plus CEO and co-founder Kieran.
Welcome. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work I've missed hearing out loud the past few months. Our own Director of Digital Innovation at Seuss Plus, Lauren Alani. She's back from maternity leave, and we are very excited about that and ready to help us kick off an essential conversation that we'd like to have with you beyond the checklist, the hidden risks in clinical systems compliance. My name's Kieran Engels. It's lovely to have this time together, Lauren, because we have these conversations together for years now, but I'm really excited to have this opportunity to record a podcast together because for biotechs, compliance doesn't always mean safe. So I'm really excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. I'm back.
Yeah, back by dope demand. Yes, we are very excited about that. And what's been so lovely is it's not been that we haven't been speaking and interacting, because it's not that nothing has happened outside of you having a beautiful baby boy. A lot has also continued to happen in this landscape for our clients, and it's exciting to hear, because I think it's actually very interesting to hear when you are not in the details on the day-to-day, but actually a step back. What also do we notice when we have a slightly different perspective? So I think it's exciting to speak about this today and at this moment with you.
It's actually really lovely because what it's shown to me is the pace of change. Just being out for a few months to have my baby and then come back, suddenly the pace of change is very much brought to the fore, because I can suddenly see actually in that very short period of time, has been a lot of change when it comes to guidelines, when it comes to current practices around data integrity, what data we're using, what innovations we're using. And it's amazing. It's helped put it into perspective for me how important it is to continuously evolve and check what's going on in this space, because it is so fast.
Yeah. And I think also it's so fun because we started talking about the topics that we and challenges that we're actually executing now. We started talking about this 4 years ago, because that's when you signaled a risk, we signaled a risk. Together we started saying, oh, but this is something that's so important. It's coming. We must all be compliant. And this is something that is, it's a space where many decision makers in smaller biotech are less comfortable with, and therefore making lots more of assumptions. And it took a while, didn't it, to have those who are making the decisions to actually understand what did that mean. And initially we had lots of conversations where people were like, but this is irrelevant. It's not so important. It's in control. There's not problems here. So it's very wonderful to think about when we started talking about this 3.5 years ago, and then 2.5 years ago, you joined Seuss, and that where we are today, that evolution has been in the day-to-day, not quick. But when you look back, you can see how much has changed. So that's really exciting. So the first question I'd like to ask you is really about the hidden risks. It's the things that others don't see when they're in it, or they may make assumptions about. So what are actually the most common blind spots in digital trials, and especially as more and more systems and tools enter the clinical landscape?
So I think this, to your point, you're completely right. Until biotechs and investors actually look at this space, it's kind of a big blind spot in its whole self. Data integrity and all these evolutions of regulations and guidelines that we've seen over the last few years is a giant blind spot in itself. And it's not until the activities start taking place that I think pretty soon we're going to turn around and go, I can't believe we never did that. It's unbelievable that we missed this giant elephant in the room and we just continued without actually addressing, the main point of the clinical trial. And the main thing that lives with us in the years, 25 years to come is the data. And yet, sometimes we don't even know which system it's in or who's checking it or who's responsible for it. And by putting these vital steps into place, we can suddenly start to create this picture of where it is, how much we can trust it. We're in very much a period of our lives of fake news. Have we got fake data? How real is this? But it's also about documentation. Have we got the right documentation in place to that when we've actually submitted our data, that regulators and everyone that kind of, even investors, anyone that comes to the table to have a look at the data can go, how much do we trust it? And do we actually believe in where this is? And okay, let's have a look at the audit trail. Let's have a look who put that in, or who made a change here, or anything that might impact the metadata, for example. And practically, we've got a lot of clients that have looked into this and helped to improve the robustness around their data. But in some cases, we've seen clients who have, say, submitted a data flow diagram, but haven't managed to do all the bits. So while they've done part of it, so part of the story, they haven't then had the other documentation in place that actually helps ensure the trust is there in the data. It might be very good data, but if you can't show that you've done the right oversight through systems inventory, for example, a system risk assessment, that you haven't monitored your audit trails or whatever it might be, that suddenly we can't create this full picture of actually the data we have developed does have the required data integrity and quality that we're now asked to deliver. And in some respects, we've got clients that it also impacts from even the validation. So, the data is fine, the audit trail is fine, they have everything that they needed to. But actually, if you go back to step one, they're not collecting it with the device that's valid for their patient population. And then suddenly, because we've gone to all this effort to get all this data, and yet our data has not been developed and captured in a way that we can include it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge hurdle.
And I think it's very interesting because I think in every industry, guidelines generally are behind or are not running ahead of what is general practice in a lot of ways. If I look at the guidelines for the past, 24 months, 36 months, there has been an evolution where I think in certain ways they're actually ahead now of standard industry practice. And it's interesting to see this sense of, we need to catch up. But isn't that under control? And what I think the beauty of it is we're not, the regulations and how they're driving knowing systems inventory. You know what systems are being used. And it's not just one signature, but the core team knows what is in place. And I think that's even step one has been interesting. How much is that information disseminated within the teams that are in control of how things are happening? You have a project lead that doesn't quite know how those systems, which systems, how they're set up, what they're used for. And an oversight doesn't know it either because we make an assumption that it's in place. So the systems inventory, knowing what is there and what it does, is just a beautiful step. It's not about control, choice, change. It's about knowing. And then what are actually those risks that are with this, understanding how that data flows. It's the regulations drive us to have more control and a better understanding. And I think that's what I think is the beauty of a lot of this evolution. It's driving a maturity. I don't think it's curbing what are all of the options now, the hundreds and hundreds of cool specific systems and tech providers out there and device providers out there that fix a singular problem. How does it integrate in the whole? What is our most important? And in that level of detail, I see many clients that somehow primary endpoint data or secondary endpoint data is not prioritized enough. And that's what I think is really exciting about your risk analysis, is that you can actually make sure that that's at the top of the list. And we have a better understanding of what is a roll-on impact of any chief deciding that, we're going to shift slightly which endpoint or which data has priority or more importance, because it then also changes. Okay, so then we need to have a more rigid oversight or more rigid review of validation, et cetera. So I think it's a very good thing for our industry, because it rolls on to the next question that I also have, is that it's part of a much wider conversation. Whenever I drop the words data integrity or ask about data integrity, you see this visceral reaction because there is no client that we have worked with, or there are no investors that we've worked with that's a given. It must be similar to patients must be safe, right? That's been ingrained very deep in all of us. And it's also a very big, important element of what we do. But when you start digging down to what does that mean and how do you show that and what are the risks involved with that, that's where it becomes a very much, yes, of course it's fixed. It's good. Of course our data has integrity, which is what it should be. But when you look to see how do we prove that, that's where sometimes that gets less in control than what we would expect and what the guidelines require. But it links further to that, right? Data integrity outside of having control of that for your study and to increase the opportunity and the increase the chance of approvals. It also rolls on further towards investor confidence and towards potentially, because you've mentioned this before to me, to potentially a partner or an exit or a big pharma to purchase.
Mhm.
So how does the strong system oversight link to inspection readiness, investor confidence, and ultimately that milestone success that's important for big pharma? That was a very big question. Start anywhere.
Essentially, you need to make sure you've got the right documentation in place to show that you can demonstrate that you've put the right oversight into place. And you mentioned some key documents in there that will be looked at because of the changing guidelines. So these are not optional; these are required, which is already step one, because it's about people knowing that they're now required. We find a lot of the time as well, but also a huge part of this is the whole data lifecycle. So it's not a check and done. It's a what have you done as your oversight throughout the trial to ensure that you've managed the full data lifecycle throughout the duration of your clinical trial. So what is your frequency of having these moments where you can check whether the data has integrity, whether you're confident, resolve issues? Because quite often, yes, when you do look for things, you do find issues. We had a client where we looked and we found that a percentage of their primary endpoint had been lost. Wow, that's a huge oversight. And because we looked at it, we were actually able to recover most of it. If you don't look and you wait to submission or wait to database lock, then you might have missed that opportunity because some of that data was actually captured and floating in temporary folders. So if you then don't realize it's gone, go and look for it and rescue it, then it's gone. And when you're relying on, a lot of our clients are more the earlier phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 2B, that type of area. And so you're not relying on that many patients, which means every single patient counts. You can't afford to lose one patient's data. So this is why looking at it, although it might on the outlook look like a load of extra work that you need to do, it's work that I promise you is, one, needed because it's a regulatory requirement, but also two, has huge benefit. So it will make your chance of success higher. And of course, another very important document is the data flow diagram, which is again not a static requirement. It's something that you need to continue to work on. And one of the important aspects there is how is data getting from one system to the other. And I think a really important point is that if you don't know in which system your data is, how can you say that it has integrity? You can't. So this data flow diagram really helps to create a visualization of actually where everything is. And it's kind of like my roadmap, if you like, of looking at where it's the beginning point that I use of where is the risk then in this diagram. And part of it is, or a huge part of it actually, is how data flows between these systems, and it's the data transfer. So is it a integration, in which case who's managing that if it's two different systems? I mean, in an ideal world, you'll have using the same model in the background, but it's not always the case. And you'll have the same database, which again is very rare, I would say. There's a few vendors now which are using the same database, which is super exciting and great to see that transition. But in the majority of cases, even in the large CROs, and I'd actually say large CROs they have more systems, and this view is perhaps greater than it would be in some of these new kind of CROs that have popped up with their own technology that they've kind of homegrown and made sure that everything connects. Instead it's very much an acquisition strategy, which is trying to stick this Lego piece to this Lego piece and seeing how it can go. And often we rely on manual transfer, which means we're requiring a kind of a manual download and a manual upload and reconciliation between those two. And again, that's a piece where we've got a client that's relying on a manual download upload for their eligibility criteria. And you kind of look at that and go, okay, how quickly can we manage this process then? And how quick is that reconciliation? Because we're going to need an element of speed to ensure that they can meet their recruitment timelines. So, there's all these moving pieces, and it all needs to form part of your oversight strategy.
Yeah. What I love, I have like Excel and reports and data analysis all excite me, contracts too. So I know I sit in this, not everyone has the same thing, but what I love about the digital data flow that's part of the clinical systems analysis we do is that it gives a centralized, aligned, visual agreement of how does this work? And it allows so many different functions and so many different layers to understand the same thing. For me, it has a similar purpose to KPIs and study metrics. KPIs, why I love KPIs is it allows us to have a conversation about the same base data. So we both can see visually in terms of the data, there's a signal there. Something's not quite going the way it should. The digital data flow does for me the same. Like, hey, you see individuals from different functional departments and different layers in the organization actually going, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize that. So what does that mean? Because we assume it's a system, it's data. We assume it's perfect, or we assume it's fraught with error, but we don't actually know why and know how to fix it. And we're oftentimes layers away from where the fix is, trying to interact with non-client facing staff members. When if we all understand the same thing, at least we are having a conversation in the same language. And then we can also agree to what risks are actually involved and what we're going to do to mitigate, to understand. So for me, and it makes me sad when I see companies who are, yeah, we have a digital data flow, we're fine. So, okay, so then tell me where your biggest risk areas. And it's crickets, or it's, yeah, but leave it alone. It's fine. Okay. Well, when it's not, you don't find out until you are indeed have data you cannot recoup. You have costs incurred that you're going to have to catch up. You have more patients you need to get, or just huge friction in relationships because we're not either speaking the same language or even know which language we should be speaking together. So I think it brings together the fixed systems and the human understanding, and therefore we can align to decide what needs to be done. So I think that's a really good point. Something you've mentioned to me before that I wanted to make sure we also talk about. So you talked about investor confidence, and because investor confidence is not just linked to what is the highest chance of us getting approval, it's also having that data in order to attract the next step, be it a next round of fundraising for the next development, be it a potential partnership with a pharma or an exit to a pharma. How do you see that linking together?
I would say it would form part of the due diligence of, are we going to acquire this asset or not? Do you have the right data and documentation in place? And if you can't show your workings and show that you have followed the recent kind of way that we're really getting clarification on how we should be checking that our data has integrity. If you haven't followed those steps, then I would say that in the due diligence for the investor or for the big pharma, they quite rightly will be questioning what they can do with the asset. Would they want to acquire it? Would they want to acquire it for the same value as you perceive the value to be worth based on your studies? If they then have to redo the study in a way that gives the assurance that is required. So investors and big pharma will be putting more steps into place, and if they're not, then they should be, to do the due diligence on the assets they're actually acquiring.
And I think there is due diligence happening. And I think one of the things that someone who spent a lot of their time integrating, had decades of experience working at a very big pharma, said to me when I spoke to about what we were doing, he said, what is wonderful about smaller biotechs and pharma actually adopting this mindset is that as the end user of that transaction, I know what I can use, what I don't need to redo, because I cannot prove its value, the value of that data, and I know how to integrate it or not. So that's huge end value. So when that rolls back to impacting the transition, it may not. It may take a very long time for that to happen, but I think that as the whole landscape is evolving more quickly, that what will come together more and more, rather than I've got this asset or this team or this, I need to incorporate it and see how do we use it. There will be more checks earlier on for it. So thank you for that. And just we are all about that interaction between vendors and their clients, our clients, the biotech and pharma. Where there are humans, there are errors, but where there are humans, it is also fraught with assumptions, right? And one of the things is that this isn't, for us, a wonderful way to drive an asset through development, through clinical development. We need to be utilizing vendors, and most vendors are much better suited than trying to do it in-house. Not everything, but there's specialty expertise and knowledge needed. So that collaboration and the relationship is very important. But part of the job of a sponsor and of our clients is to actually oversee. So I sometimes feel like we're talking about the myths of vendor compliance. Like there's this assumption, who is doing what and what can I assume? So it's your system, therefore you're responsible. And I assume you have that under control. But you've said this to me before, is that we run into the fact that the sponsors, they assume that their vendors handle things like validation of the systems that are in place. But what is the danger of that mindset? Because on the one hand, I think you're paying millions and therefore you should be able to assume that certain things are in place. But what is the danger of that complete assumption?
So the danger of the assumption is that one, it's incorrect, because if you don't check and look and you assume and then
You're
you're
still
caught
at
out,
fault.
yeah, and then you're still at fault, because yes, you can delegate as many tasks as you like as a sponsor, but you're still ultimately responsible, and that includes of your data integrity. It includes of your systems and ensuring that they're fit for purpose. So actually, if you haven't got a process in place that can show that the systems are fit for purpose, and that includes, the labs that you're working with. It includes any of your vendors, from your capturing your primary endpoint through ePro, eCOA, particularly when you're using, one of the benefits of working with biotechs is actually that they are so innovative. So we've
Yeah.
worked with loads of biotechs that have, say, used continuous monitoring endpoints and wearables, which really, they're at the forefront of technology and what we can capture now, which is so exciting. But if you haven't ensured that those systems are fit for purpose and shown that you've done the steps, then actually you can't show you working, and it leaves you in a very vulnerable place. So I would say that unless you've done the steps and taken the steps you need to, that you are in a vulnerable position, and that your data may not be accepted at the end of the day.
Because it is the correct assumption that the vendor is responsible for the validation of the system. Is that true?
Ultimately, the sponsor is responsible for that. So you've got to ensure that you have checked that the process that the vendor has taken to ensure that it's validated is correct, and also that the validation documents themselves are up to scratch. So we've seen quite a few clients go, "Yeah, I'm sure it's validated." That's not good
Well,
enough.
that's the
No.
assumption. But in my brain, so how I translate that is that it is not the case that a vendor says, oh, we haven't validated, that's your problem, sponsor. It could be if they say that, but it is up to the sponsor to check that it is in place. But in essence, it is the responsibility of whoever is selling you a system. They should be investing in that validation or not.
Well, yeah, as a vendor, you would hope that they have done everything they
Oh, no, but
need.
then you go, hope and assumptions, they're far too close together.
Well, but that's the thing. If you, as a sponsor, you don't check, yes, if I
Then
was
you're at
talking to
fault.
a vendor, you should be validating, ensuring you've got a system in place, that you've selected the right system and it's fit for purpose. But as a sponsor,
You need to have checked. Yeah.
yeah, You've got to make sure that you have checked and that you've put the right, whether it be a computer systems validation. That's probably the more robust way that we would recommend. Some people try to squidge it all in a qualification audit, but the danger of that is, do you go into enough detail to be able to demonstrate that you've actually looked at specific validation documentation as well as the process? So there's a question of how you've achieved it, but it's how you've achieved it, not if you've achieved it.
Yeah. I think that's with many things, is that we often think, or what I see our clients thinking, and what they say is, oh no, we've got all of these things to do. And they want to do it right the first time, always, which I understand. But a lot of with these types of things, there are taking the steps, and this is what we thought at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When we put this in place, this is where the risks that we have identified, this is what we've put in place to do it. This is how we've checked it. I think that we don't often see response or issues with it being wrong. If you miss something, yeah, you may have missed something because you didn't know. No one knew. It wasn't a risk at that point until it was. And how did you deal with it? It's about making sure that you've done it and you're complying to it for yourself. And that's what I love about this application of risk. But yeah, that's my happy place, is that the documentation and saying, these are the risks we are going to mitigate. These are the ones that we know are there, but we're not going to mitigate. We'll put these signals in place. And those, they just are. We can do nothing about them. That's part of the business. It's part of what we're doing. We leave it. That process is alignment. It allows you to have reduced capacity internally. It allows you to manage all of those stakeholders that are involved and have opinions, but I think that applies here as well. It's that you know, and that you make decisions, and that you have checked that validation is in place, and that that's fit for purpose for your needs. Not every system that you are using needs to have the same level of documentation, validation as the other. Some
No, it
of
should
them
be
are
very much a risk-based approach.
exactly. So it's not black and white. And I think when we are insecure as humans and leaders, we think, oh God, it has to be perfect. We need to eliminate this risk. That's here not so much the point. It's what is our biggest risk? What are the main priorities, and what do we make sure is well in place?
And as soon as you know or are aware that there's a gap, it's just deal with it then. We're doing the best we can. It's a very big job, but there's lots of steps to take. And as soon as you're aware of a gap, it's about how we go about and resolve it.
Yeah. So the last topic I wanted to touch on, which is an exciting one, I know, for us, for our clients, for our industry, for the world, is incorporation of AI tools. It's an area that feels for many both exciting and scary and risk fraught, but actually may allow us to do things faster and cheaper, which is a huge interest, right? And especially for smaller biotech, we live to a budget that have been fundraised. Investors have a timeline from which to exit, and to ensure that those who have invested their money get a return on that investment on that fund. So it's very much linked to time and budget. But it's also exciting because we feel like it can reduce some of the tedious and the difficult and the talk about. Would you mind just giving us a few thoughts on the incorporation of AI in clinical development, attractiveness, what risks does bring? And I know you've talked about as well the regulations that are in place.
Yeah. I mean, this is partly why I said it. There's so much change coming back from maternity. I wasn't even gone that long, and suddenly AI is being used so much more within the clinical trial space. It's really exciting to see that transition. If we think back to 2016, there was one application to the FDA that included AI. Last year there was 300, and then I've come back from maternity, and suddenly we have our first biotech clients all using AI. Like, wow! But it does mean that now other regulations need to be considered. So we can't treat the application and use of AI in the same way that we would any other system. So there are additional steps and considerations that we need to take, and we just need to make sure that, as with anything, when we're including it, that we're following the right steps. suddenly the use of AI, we have the EU AI Act that is now apparent. We have the new FDA regulatory guidance on their seven-step credibility assessment framework, to consider. We have all these additional things, but should that make us fearful of including it? No, because from a investment standpoint, I think investors are really excited about it, actually. And I think as
We know they
people,
are.
we're excited about it. But it's just about ensuring that we're doing it in the right way. And I think biotechs, much more nimble organizations generally, are perfectly placed to start exploring this and including it. But it's just making sure that we're doing it in a way that is checking off the guidelines that have been put into place, because that de-risks it for us and makes sure that it will be accepted at the end. Because it, again, without following the right steps, it just puts us at risk for not including it. But from an excitement, energy, I think it's right for the science as well of what we do, that we are considering it and looking at it and its potential in our organisation. So really excited about it. I think it's the number of applications being used are a lot greater than ever before. And I think, practically speaking, on an individual level, we're all probably using AI a bit more in our own lives, which is helping to make it more accessible in our minds. But again, it's about knowing when to use it and how to use it safely.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you. So, Lauren, I think we're at time because we could talk for hours, and I look forward to speaking more about these topics in the years to come. So thank you for giving us a masterclass in what compliance means, in what risks we identify, and touching on some of that topics. And for our listeners, thank you for listening. Don't let the vendor assurances or any of the myriad of assumptions you have either lull you into comfort or drive you into the panic zone. Ask the hard questions. Ask for help. Becomes clearer and clearer what it is that needs to be done, but that we think it's a good evolution is definitely the case. Own your data. Compliance is not a checkbox. It is a process of evolution. As Lauren said, it's sometimes evolving, and that is okay. We need to make sure that we have oversight and that we know how this is flowing through our clinical development design.
And if you do want to read more as well, I have written a white paper on this called Hidden Risks. So there's more on aspects that you might need to have a look at and just make sure that you're following some of the areas we've seen in biotechs fall down. So that's on my LinkedIn page. Please have a look if you'd like more information. And then in the coming months, I'll be writing more on AI as well.
Exciting, exciting. So reach out if you have questions. We're all, as an industry, we are all in the same evolution, and it's an exciting time. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Cut the Chat Life Science Insider. Make sure you're following Seuss Plus on LinkedIn and be the first to know about upcoming podcasts.